Okay, so my name's Trudy, and what interested me, this talk is basically based on the last two blogs that I've done, so the first two blogs of my topics. And so I was watching this talk by Ken Robinson. I watched it at the worst possible time, Monday morning of the topic, like the start of the topics coming on, and he talks about how the education system didn't really get started until after the Industrial Revolution, and our educational system is based on how industry was, but our industry isn't the same anymore, so why is our education like that? That's what intrigued me. So yeah, this is about the Ken Robinson talk. It's just that how the school is set out, how we go through school, is the same as how a factory would work. So if we go on to the next slide, my first talk, so for the whole topic I'm looking at how the school is structured and why it is structured in this way. Why is it still based on industry when that industry doesn't even exist anymore? That's basically what I wanted to look at, so it goes off in different directions. So the first one was, you know when you sit in a lesson, just going back to high school, you sit there at the end of the lesson, you're sitting there looking at the clock thinking, why isn't it 3:10 yet, why can't I go home? And you're waiting for that bell to ring so you can then leave. But you look around the classroom and you've got you and your mates that have all decided, oh yeah, I've done enough work, and you haven't actually completed it. There's people that completed the work ages ago and they're just sitting there quietly. And then there's the troublemakers. I was probably one of those. And then you've got the other people that probably struggled with the task that you was doing and haven't completed it. So, as I've put, in a factory, a bell is actually used to indicate when it's the end of the day or when it's lunch. So when you should have finished that set amount of work for the day. So if it's like in a factory making materials, you're meant to have made a certain amount before this bell rings for lunch or the end of the day. Other than that, it's overtime. So within a lesson, why is it based on a ringing of a bell to when we stop learning? Okay. The ringing of a bell, I know it was in my school, when a bell rings, that's when the start of the lesson is. A lot of the time you're never there, you're never actually at the start of the lesson, you're still walking to it, dawdling along with your friends. And this bell never actually means you start learning. But that, you know, when that bell rings, oh, it's the start of maths or it's the start of English. The same bell is used for like the end of a lesson. So that is putting a deadline on when you should have learned something. So it's put into a deadline. It's suggesting that we all work at the same pace. Next slide. But it's actually the speed at which we work at is dependent on the difficulty, which there is research that suggests it, but it's common sense. If you find something more difficult, it's going to take you longer to do something. But it's dependent on person, because I know I've sat in a maths lesson, found something really, really easily, but the person next to me has found it really difficult. So it's completely dependent on the different people as to whether you, to like which pace you work at. So yeah, I put it as overtime in education. If you haven't finished something by the end of a work day, you then have to either remain at work to finish it, or if it's a job where you can take something home, like teachers marking, a lot of them take that home. So education is set up in the same way. If you don't finish something in the time of a class, you are then expected to take this home to complete it. But who do you ask when you're at home? I know I tend to ask, I even do it now, ask my mum, but my mum hasn't got a clue, not gonna lie. So who do you ask? Because you can't ring up the teacher saying, no, I'm stuck on this little bit of work that you should have theoretically completed it in class. There is actually research that suggests that homework is positively correlated to academic achievement, but it's only if there is a parent present that is able to offer support. So if that child hasn't got that, who are they meant to ask? So it's then that correlation is invalid. Okay. So my blog this week looked at gender splitting. It's something that started when education system became quite implemented, especially with private schools. There was a gender split, so you had an all-girls school or an all-boys school. But as the years have gone on, the numbers of these schools has decreased. And my blog this week was meant to have been on this and another topic, but as I started looking at this first, I just kept finding more and more pieces of research that took it off in different directions. But it suggests that gender splitting, teachers pay more attention to boys within a co-educational school, like give them more support. But it's based really on their behaviour. Girls are expected, as a stereotype, to be better behaved, sit there and be polite and ladylike, as it's put, whereas boys are seen as boisterous. So the single-sex schools only seem to give support in an all-girls school. It doesn't have an effect in an all-boys school. There's two conflicting viewpoints, and I actually agree with the second one, although the majority of the research backs up the first one to an extent. So it's that girls achieve better in a single-sex school, but in a co-educational school, it creates like a mini society. That is what life will be like after school. Okay. So yeah, cognitive abilities. I've noticed this as I started to drive, being taught to drive by numerous men like my dad, my granddad, my brother, and they've always said women cannot park a car, ever. And then as I've been driving for about 4 years, I can parallel park my car better than what my brother can. So I'm completely different to the stereotype. I can park that car. I've got better spatial awareness than what he has. But it suggests that girls aren't as good with spatial awareness. Being in a single-sex school, you've got no competition from boys, so you can develop these spatial awareness skills and also mathematical skills in order to achieve better. So you've got no competition from boys, which I don't see the harm in a little bit of competition. I know I've been in a class full of boys, and you actually push yourself to be able to beat the boys, so that doesn't really make sense to me. It's actually, I was reading, there was a huge paper on this, and there's one hypothesis of the hunter-gatherer, which is evolutionary, and it suggests that men are superior in these skills because they needed the spatial awareness skills to be able to hunt, whereas the women just gathered different crops and stood around and didn't do very much from what I can gather. So we didn't develop these skills, but we are more superior in be able to remember the location of stuff. So it links back to the stereotype of men just do a man's look and just pick something up, oh, it's not there, whereas we know exactly where it is all the time. Okay, next slide. But we aren't biologically set up different. Our biology is exactly different, so they're exactly the same. So is it just down to practice? So this found piece of research that suggests we are exactly the same in abilities of problem-solving skills, but if you ask a man to be able to, something else worded, like transform something, like a spatial thing, men will become superior. We cannot transform something mentally in our brains. But if you asked us to remember the location of where one thing was placed, we would be superior in that. So is it just based on the questions that we're asked, like in maths and science, that makes the men look superior in those subjects? Okay. Yeah, I'll just put it, is it down to practice? Because this cognitive divide is actually reducing. Like, I can park a car better than my brother. So that because more women are driving and using these spatial skills, the divide's reducing. So I was just looking at how these stereotypes actually affect us in schools. So it suggested that within the top ones within maths and science, it says that within a single-sex school, this is just based on girls, they yielded better scores and results than when they was in a co-educational school, and would actually carry on maths to a higher, to A level or to higher education, and then into a career that didn't fit with the stereotype. So it's just that less girls will go into to be a physics teacher or something because it doesn't fit with the stereotype. This is one that I found interesting within computer science. I noticed this at A level in ICT. there was one girl and the rest of the class was boys, and it's just that in a single-sex school, girls don't feel the pressure of a highly dominated subject by men, so they have got more confidence in that subject, whereas if they was in a room full of men, they wouldn't feel as confident. They'd feel like they lacked ability. But looking around the room, you see a lot of, this is within psychology, a lot of females and not so many men, but they don't seem affected by this. It's just women that seem affected by going into a subject that's highly dominated by men. Yeah, it's this one piece of research. It's within a co-educational school, but within physics they had an all-girls class, and within this class they actually yielded the better results as if they were in a single-sex school, but it was still within one school. So I think this is probably the best way to do it if they are still going to split genders, because they've still got the society the same as real life. So you've still got they'll still develop the social skills that they need to be able to interact with the opposite sex. So when education first came about, there was a lot of gender split within the workplace. So men got higher paid. We did different jobs. So it was highly stereotypical of that. But that divide's gone now. So why is our education still looking at this gender split? Yeah, within a factory you've got one way of doing something. You do this, then you do this, then you do this. But can that be applied to learning? There isn't just one answer to everything. So it'll go into divergent thinking. So there is more than one answer to every question, but we're looking at there's multiple questions but only one answer. That's not learning to me. Yeah, it's just that there's a schema of you go to school, you study hard, you get a degree, you get a highly paid job. But you can't promise that anymore. Yes, you're better having a degree than not, but we can't say this is something that on one of the TED Talks I watched. You can't predict what the economy is going to be at the end of the week. So how do we know what skills we've got to learn to be able to get this highly paid job that we might not get for another 3 years? So why is our education still trying to push this schema when it's not fitting with our society anymore? Okay. I found these two pictures. The one on the left is of a school, the one on the right is of a factory. Why do these look exactly the same? Our education shouldn't be based on a factory approach, so why are these two the same? I just thought it was really strange how they look so similar. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you not think the fact that that's still going could perhaps due to parents and things? I know that I've had friends in the past that have gone to same-sex schools and they themselves haven't wanted to go. It's their parents that have gone, we want you to go to a same-sex school because it always disrupts you and you learn better.
Yeah, well, there's a piece of research that actually says it looks at how their parents were schooled, and it's just that if their mother went to a single-sex school, they usually follow that trend and they will then go to a single-sex school. But it's just in that parents view the schooling in a different way. They only look at the fact that better results are yielded, they get higher scores, but they don't actually look at the negative points of it. They don't see those. So I think it's one of those things, parents will actually have to be educated themselves to see this difference. So that's how I see it anyway. Any other questions? Yes.
It's just more an observation than a question. You were talking about the time that we spend and the bell ringing,
Mm-hmm.
The real factory rigidity in our learning experiences. And one thing that I've observed, and I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but one of the things I've observed over the years, if you ask first years to do a task that takes 3 or 4 hours, it's almost the end of the world because it takes so much time. And by the time students get to the third year, there's a major shift in their thinking about learning.
Yeah.
And as one of my project students, you'll know, if I say, oh well, you should probably do this, and you look at it and think, oh, that'll take me 15 hours to actually change all of this and do this, but it's not that big of a deal. You just go, oh, okay, go off and do it. So there's somehow in university, one of the things we have managed to do is break down a little bit of that you know, there's certain time blocks that you spend learning, and if you don't fit all your learning into that block, that's not good.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the third year, it's like, oh well, it takes a while, we'll do it.
I think it's down to within like high school education, you're more spoon-fed the information, whereas you get to university and you like go off, you find it. Whereas I think it needs to start at an earlier age, so you need to be more self-regulated in your own learning, and that's what's not implemented. That's why it's more like a factory, whereas a factory wouldn't go oh just get this done in however long. Whereas within education, it's like your test is here, you need to do it by then. So it's a bit too regimented in how it's set up, I think. Yeah. Any more questions?
I think you made a good point about the question that you said in the TED talk that you saw about not knowing the way the economy is going to shift.
Yeah.
It's something you can't sort of foresee. I've seen a lot of changes in my time.
Yeah.
Lost the company, ended up in the university. I've like done so many different things. So it'd be great if you sort of knew what the future was going to be, and you've got to try and, you know.
Yeah.
But I think having the skills as well,
Yeah.
having lots of different skills can help you, because I use my wife as an example because we're totally different, but she's really educated in the sense she's got 2 degrees, she's got everything. And she's not been able to get a job for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Everywhere she's gone, they've said you haven't got the experience. Even though she's done all the exams, she's done all the qualifications with it, she couldn't get it because she had no practical experience.
Yeah, I think it needs to be like a combination of the both. So you need that education, but you need the skills coming through.
So I suppose it's useful for students, and I've got my sister's daughters, and they're working in pubs and things and doing stuff,
Yeah.
but at least they're getting other skills
Yeah.
that they may have to pull upon.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Anything else? Yep. Thank you.
I love those last two pictures.